And I'll go to Moodle so that we take a look at what is coming up, okay? Okay, I see Kaylee is coming up. Coming on, okay. So next week, right? We continue with poetry by Martinez Espada, race and anti-racist practices. These are topics, right? General topics pertaining to the poetry and discussions, political agency in poetry, work experiences in poetry. We have seen this before, feminist advocacy in poetry. I have here then a list of poems or the pages for you to be reading for Tuesday, right? So keep reading your poems and we'll discuss some of them. I have here, as you see, an interview to Martinez Espada for next week. Then that I'm asking you to watch, and then more poems to finish the book more or less, right? 142, 170, and this is our last session for the semester before the final exam takes place. In addition to this, for the week, I have a forum based on the interview. And what I would like you to do is to make a connection between what Martinez Espada says here, as he, in this interview, and the poetry that we have been reading. What meaningful connection can you make between the poems, our conversations, and what he's saying? Maybe one point that was interesting when in the interview for you. And so try to make a creative connection between the poetry that we have been reading and what he's saying here in the interview. Now, I wanted to be also clear about the forums. If you go to the syllabus, you'll see that this is 10% of the grade on participation. And I already gave you, let me see, 6 previous forums to participate in. And I said, for the last one, here you have one more opportunity in case you are missing participation in the forums. So this is the last one, okay? This is a good opportunity for those of you who have not necessarily shared any comments in some of the previous forums. So you are missing points, right? I would love for you, if you're missing points, to participate in this forum and gain 20 points. That's what I'm giving you per forum. This is the total at the end, right? For participation on the forums, again, is 10% of the grade, of the total grade for the class. Go to the syllabus, you will see that, okay? I want to mention those who have participated. Lindsay, you have, well, let me see. It's actually Max, Kaylee, and Megan. You have participated in 5 forums already. I'll repeat the names: Megan, Kaylee, Max. Okay. Okay. So I want to proceed to now to go over the letter, and what was it that I asked you to do? Let's see. Let's go back to this week. And raise your hand. Forum has the information, right? If in doubt, please go here. So this is the evaluation that I put together for the letter. So we have this report that will be 10 points of the total of 100. Select a paragraph, or I said even a couple of paragraphs or 2 segments, right? Nothing too lengthy, but nothing too short, because we need to know what you're writing about, right? And then we will ask you a couple of questions, and I expect you to give us logical explanations, for the questions. So I really need your participation because as you can see, it's gonna be difficult for me to come up with 2 questions, but I'll try my best to come up with one, at least with one. And this is just to be supportive of your work and you have what you have done and appreciate what you've written, right? Basically, did I share my screen with you? Sorry. I think I did not. I was talking to you, but I wasn't sharing my screen. So this is the rubric, okay? Sorry about that. And this is the side of the page, the paper report. So it's grammar, paper structure, quotations, creativity, and deadline, meeting the deadline. Okay, so that each category gives you points. That's all I'm saying. And we are today meeting for your report and our question. Okay, now you've seen it. So I'm going to go in order unless somebody would like to go first. That's what I'm going to do. So I think I don't see, is Jimena here? Lindsay's here, Kelsey, sorry. Okay. Jorge. Shamani. Okay, so Lindsay, you're first. Please turn on your.
All right. Just, can you please give me a couple?
Yeah, of course. If you could, place
So place it.
I think you have to shift it so that we see you vertically. We are seeing you horizontally. Shift the camera position.
Now I'm upside down. Like on my phone.
She's frozen for me.
Is that better, sir?
The only thing is that I think now we can see you. Yes, perfectly well. Yeah, there was a disconnect in sound and image, but we were hearing you, I think.
All right. So my laptop shut off.
Oh, wow. She's frozen, right? The
Language is a part of our.
Liz, I don't know. Lindsay, we cannot hear you.
It probably will be better if she shut off her camera. It helps the connection.
It is.
Yeah, I don't know.
No,
I think
I can probably try shutting off the Wi-Fi, but it.
Wow. Okay, I just barely can. Yeah.
There.
I think we need to give you time.
Can
and maybe if you could, I think you would.
Can you hear me now?
Barely. I think you should switch to your computer if that is possible. Or as Kels is saying, turn off the camera, I guess, but I don't like that idea because we really need to see the, the presenter. So I'm going to give Kels more, I'm sorry, oh, she's coming back. She went away, Lindsay, okay. So I'm going to go to Kels.
I actually didn't write the letter.
So I will have to skip you. Okay, Lindsay's coming back.
Yes, sorry about that. I had my Wi-Fi shut off. Can you hear me and see me?
Yes, now it's working beautifully.
Well, I had to add my mobile data on my phone. All right, I'm ready.
Okay, great.
Language is a part of our identity. It is what helps us to identify us as individuals. It helps us communicate, share ideas, or to bond with others. It can be difficult to learn a second language or speak a second language. Language is a powerful tool that helps unite and provide structure in our societies and relationships. When we were infants, we could only communicate through cries and body languages. Until we started to speak, our parents could only understand us through cries and body language. But until we started to learn our first words, we would stutter and strain to communicate, as if there was something stuck in our throats and we want to cough it up. Our parents would have to learn our signal until we could speak.
Yes, my question to you is, because that's a very initial, I guess, set of ideas for your full letter. So my question to you is, how does that connect in your view to what Richard Rodriguez wrote?
I remember in chapter 1 of Aria, Richard Rodriguez said how speaking Spanish was like, and it would be like a family language. It's what made him feel like he belonged. Like, you belong here. So language bonds him with his family. And it also helps him learn how to read. Like, when he had to learn English, in order for the nuns to understand him and create a relationship with him, a student-teacher relationship, he had to learn English in order to fully understand and comprehend his education in English.
Mhm. Yeah, that's correct. Second question by someone.
How did language relate to your life and your family? Like, how did it connect you?
In my life, well, we speak, but language to me, well, I have autism, and so it's hard for me to socially interact with people. But with my mother and my grandmother, we have like so much in common, and we know like ourselves, like it is what bonds relationships. Like, if I never spoke to my mother or my grandmother, I wouldn't have strong of a relationship as I do now. Language is not just something we communicate through. It's what helps us build bonds and relationships with others. So in that case, how language pertains to me is that also my father is deaf. In order for me to fully communicate with my father and build a relationship with him, I need to speak loud and clear so that he can hear my words. Words are more than just letters. They are, again, what help us build relationships and communicate through. So through communication and our language, we could talk about things like if we have problems, we share them. And that way we have resolve and we just build better relationships through language. That is how language pertained to me and my family.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
So next person down the road is Max. I see that he's here. Or if you're not ready, I will go to somebody else.
I'm ready. My apologies. I'm ready. Should I turn on my camera?
Yes, indeed.
All right, let's do this thing. All right. So,
Max, before you begin, since you came late, I'll
yes.
say this again to be explicit. So you are to do a short presentation. You can turn your camera on, by the way.
Right.
Short presentation, right? With maybe a couple of paragraphs from your letter that you're going to be reading to us.
Mm-hmm.
It can be at the beginning, middle, or even the end. It doesn't matter,
Right.
as long as it's kind of your main point that you want to share with us. After that, I will ask you a question, and someone else will ask you a question, and that's what Lindsay was doing, answering the second question. Okay.
Okay, that's awesome.
That's the deal. Okay. Whenever you're ready.
Okay.
And if you have a title for your letter, I would appreciate you saying the title. Maybe you wrote the title. I don't know, specific title.
So this one was letter to Richard Rodriguez. What I kind of did for this letter is I'm just going to give a little bit of a preface. What I did for this letter was I took a little bit from the quotes assignment. I kind of put a quote at the beginning that would kind of start it off. So I'm going to read the quote from the beginning, and my apologies. I'm getting a reminder for the presentation. So I started off with the quote at the very beginning of the letter before I even wrote anything. It says, it's a quote from page 4. I have the Kindle version, might be a bit different. It says, I write this autobiography as the history of my schooling. To admit the change in my life, I must speak of years as a student, of losses, of gains. So what I did was I kind of gave a preface to it in the introduction. And then I started my letter to Richard Rodriguez as the middle part of my essay. And then I finished it at the end. So what I'm going to pull from is the middle. I have to pull one more quote, and then I'm going to read it. So let me see. No, it's actually that quote. Okay, cool. So what I said was, no, it's a different one. All right, here we go. Sorry. I didn't want to respond to his questions. I didn't want to admit to him, thus to myself, the reason for my delay. I agreed to write several schools. I wrote, I cannot claim to represent socially disadvantaged Mexican Americans. The very fact that I am in a position to apply for this job should make that clear. And here we go. To start with, this quote begins with a picture I had painted for myself during my junior year at high school. I vividly remember my father telling me when I took my practice SAT that I had thought about circling white for my ethnicity. After all, my complexion was pale and I had nothing to speak of a Spanish accent. The only word I had drawn from my father, who was a perfectly fluent Spanish and English speaker, was mira, which means look. I also wasn't too certain about how my genetics had expressed themselves, since my mother was white as well, a little bit of Irish, hence the hair. I remember asking him, Dad, am I white? And my dad simply responded, well, if we're not black, we're Latino. All further correspondence with any attempts to work out exactly what my supposed father's skin color had expressed in my heritage below my skin that was too pale for me to assume was anything close to I'm sorry, one moment, my alarm's going off. Alexa.
Okay.
Let me see what that says. So I said, all further correspondence with any attempts to work out exactly what my father's skin color had expressed in my heritage below my skin that was too pale for me to assume was anything close to Latino was met with a few words. Always circle Latino. You're Puerto Rican. Always. That's what you put. That's what you always put. So I could keep reading on with my essay, but I'm sorry. But I could keep reading on my essay, but I kind of wanted to freestyle the next part of it because the next part of it is kind of more formal. So all in all, I remember my father he just said that. He just said, always circle Latino, you're Latino. And I said, well, you know, he kept telling me, always make that distinction. When you go in for a job, when you go in for this, when you go in for that, always circle Latino. You're Latino. Just always do it. Always make it clear. If anyone ever asks, you always do it. And for some reason, that always stuck in my head. And when it came to, I remember going to Frost Valley. It was a camp, and I remember being there, and they're all about diversity. You know, we don't accept anyone more than anybody else. Everyone is equal. It's all about diversity. It's all about fun. So I remember I came back and my stepmother told me like, oh, well, you have a quota. They have a quota to reach. They're just going to hire someone, you know, of course they hire good people, but they're going to hire a diverse group of people to meet that kind of quota. And I didn't understand. That was about the same time my father had taught me what it meant to be, not what it meant to be Latino. That's kind of what I'm learning now in college, but that's kind of what she said to me. So I really thought for myself, like, okay, well, that doesn't make any sense. It says right here on the legal documents, we do not discriminate because of race, gender, age, disability. We don't do that. It's all fair chance. And I never really realized that until I got my job that I have right now. That's when it kind of hit me. Like, they were all about diversity. Like, yeah, you know, you're looking for someone for the job, but we're looking for more candidates of these qualities, you know? And I kind of learned that I was kind of like a diversity point. I was a point that occasionally people have made. I mean, I'm 21, I'm young, but I'm also Latino and I also have red hair. So it's like, it's really diverse. So I kept thinking to myself, like, I felt that it was really important to always make that distinguishing factor that I'm Latino, but I want to put in better work so I can be more than just, you know, oh, we hired him because he's Latino, because he's diverse, because he just lends that aspect to the company, to the job, to whatever it is. So that's why if I ever get my foot in the door for who I am, for my skin color, or for my heritage, or for my disability, which is, I had said previously, I went on to describe a scene in class that had happened prior. I have ADHD, but no one would really know the difference because it's kind of like, you know, it gets old with age and you kind of move on from it. So, but on paper, that gives me these kind of extensions. That gives me these kinds of things that I could really use to just complain. You know, I could say, oh, well, I need like 3 more weeks to do this. Like, I don't need 3 more weeks to do this. I don't need half an hour more on my test. I don't need anything like that. But, you know, if I'm working really hard and things are really, really difficult, and me having ADHD gives me a humane 1-day extension from a professor, then that, you know, refuses to cooperate like always, then maybe I'll think about it. But there's people who need it. And I don't think I need it so much, so I'm going to use the privilege that I have in that kind of event to give more to myself and to the people around me.
Thanks. You made me think of, this is sort of a question, comment.
Yes.
Because throughout the book by Rodriguez, tell us about the many occasions in which he was reading and studying and researching and getting to have, you know, to Stanford, or making it big in higher education, if you will.
Right.
And then he gets to the moment when he will have to apply for job positions.
Right.
He says, as you were referring to, he says, you know, well, I'm complicated here because I don't, this is the word he uses actually, I don't see myself as a minority. And I don't see myself as a minority because I have a, you know, a great education. So
Right.
it's unfair because and I always thought, so he does it out of guilt, if you think about it, you know?
Right.
If I'm going to go that way, I'm going to be guilty, and you need to connect that to his Catholicism somehow.
Right.
But my point is, wasn't he already kind of exceptional? I mean, if I am, what do you think, Max? Because he was saying, okay, let's say one Ivy League institution such as Yale. Okay, I am interviewing Richard Rodriguez, and I see him as a Mexican American, plus this great scholar.
Right.
I'm going to give him a chance,
Right.
a solid chance. And then maybe I'm going to hire him for not just one reason, because he's a Mexican American person, but because he's a great scholar and he will be a tremendous plus to our pool, of employees or faculty members teaching here. Plus we have,
Right.
the complication that we don't have many Latinx students, and he will bring us more, and blah, blah, blah. I can continue on. So what do you think about that, the way he presents the situation?
I think it's so important for, I like to say no one's hired for one reason, Oh, you can use a mop, you're hired. You can do this, you're hired, because that's how people make mistakes with that kind of thing. But I could feel myself really identifying with that when he, like you said, when he was throwing out he was just basically doing the equivalent of crumpling up all the applications and everything and saying like, no, I'm not going to go just for this reason. I could really identify with that because I've had something of that nature happen to me. I was granted a very, very large life-changing allocation recently, and I couldn't explain it to anybody. I couldn't explain how me, of all people, for the reason I got it, was more deserving of it than somebody else. And it wasn't like an award. It wasn't like something like that. It was something that could have legitimately saved the lives of a lot of people. And I asked myself, like, why did I get this? And I felt guilty. At first, I was thrilled, throw your hands up. Ooh, I'm so excited. And it's strange because I know that in a similar manner, because of my skin color, I went on to say in the essay, someone who has no disability. But, there's also a quote that I believe I mentioned in my quote list. It's when Richard Rodriguez is talking with a student, and the student tells him there used to be checks in place to have minorities get ahead to the people because they're behind, but now it's the other way around. Now it's their head and they're going to keep going ahead. We've done the same, if not equivalent work, if I didn't do a little bit better, and you got it. And they didn't even pass a sparing glance at me because of who you are, because it's diversity. I feel conflicted sometimes. I feel like if more people could use that kind of privilege or opportunity they have, for the people who don't need it, I feel like it could definitely make a difference. Unfortunately, I'm to a point where I need the kind of allocations for a different reason, especially when it comes to like the job I have right now. The job I have right now is helping my family, and it's helping me, and it's helping the few people that I love. And right now, without that, they would be in a way worse spot. So I try and tell myself that, yeah, so, because of this and because of this and because of this, I got hired, and I'm able to help the few people I have create a life, when all these other people who probably done way more than me, who probably done way more assignments, who probably have their PhD, who probably have all this stuff, probably don't have what I have, or probably can't now get what I have. I have to make the best of it for the people I care about. I have to make the best of it for, and I have to move for change like him. I have to say, reject some of the things, don't say, yes, it's all me. Yes, I need it. Can I have more? Can I have more? I'm not going to send an accommodation to your office saying I need 3 more weeks to complete an essay when I'm perfectly capable of sitting it down right now, but I'm just tired, or I'm perfectly capable of doing it, but I don't want to. And I feel like the more people, there's always going to be people who do that, and it's going to offset the people who are putting in that honest work and who actually do need the help, because there are people who do need that help. So I feel the more awareness we could bring to that situation, and when it comes to the book, I really feel that it's important to not snatch up every single opportunity. I think going to a really good college like Yale or Harvard, I think that I can see that being a way longer lasting 4-year thing. But if you can get your education another way and you can move forward and do this, that's good. But I don't know if I necessarily would have turned that down. And I suppose that's the big $1 million question, huh? What to accept, what not to accept. What are you taking away from the people who need it? And what are you giving to the people who are having these fake allocations for the reasons that they don't need it?
Is there another question? We need a second question for Max.
Ask me a question, guys. I'm really excited. I really love doing this essay. Please. I guess you're up, Professor. Do you have another question for me?
I was listening to you, actually, more than trying to come up with a second question.
I feel like you answered all the questions I had.
I think so too.
I think that's a good sign then. Well, but thank you.
There you go. Okay, it's all right. It's all right, Max. I think yeah.
I really appreciate it. Thank you. I do have to leave. I did take some time off, but I need to jump back now. Thank you so much, Professor. I'm gonna definitely watch the rest of your presentations online for this class when the professor posts it. So thank you all. I really appreciate it, and keep going. Don't be ashamed of what you don't have during this time, or what you're getting if you don't feel you need it. You're entitled to happiness above all else.
I agree with that. I totally agree with that. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Professor. Goodbye.
JD, your turn.
Retweet Max. Someone said retweet Max. Thank you. Have a nice day.
So hello, everyone. In my little section, I talk about my background, but I think it's very important to talk about someone's background when referring to language, because it could really make a difference, and I feel like you'll understand me a bit more. So that just wanted to say that before I started reading it.
Okay.
My parents are Mexican immigrants who had a goal to attain a better quality of life, not only for themselves, but for their children as well. This included education, new opportunities that they were not granted back in their native land. From the early ages of my life, I attended a bilingual preschool for children of migrants. This preschool is government funded and is based off of one's status, which would be migrant or seasonal migrant, which was what my parents were considered. They were seasonal migrants. The school provided resources for children such as food, clothing, and a bilingual education. The language I mainly spoke was Spanish. I would only speak Spanish because it was the language that was spoken around me. My parents did not know English when I was much younger. One quote that stood out to me was when you were referring to the private language and a public language. This is very interesting to me because I had never put much thought into the language that I was speaking. The quote reads, but then there was Spanish, Español, my family's language, Español, the language that seemed to me a private language, page 15. I can say with confidence that the quote is valid in my own personal experience because I only spoke Spanish with my parents. And while I was going to school, I learned to speak English, the public language of the United States. And that was my section.
Yeah, I think it's like a very well-rounded, segment. I'll give somebody else a chance to ask the first question.
For my question, I was wondering if when he talked about how he really didn't support your native language being taught in school or not taught, just accepted as much, did you agree with him or did you have another opinion?
Great question.
Well, I think, me being me, I guess it depends on who you talk to, but this is my own personal opinion. I don't think one should disregard their language of origin just because I personally did when I was growing up, and I speak about it more in my essay. I was kind of ashamed, not ashamed, but I wanted to fit in more with everyone because I went to a predominantly like Anglo school, and that really influenced me because I wanted to fit in with everyone else like I saw, because I was one of the only like few colored students in my classroom. And I feel like me getting that in my head, or me thinking about that at an early age, really affected me. But me being much older and reflecting on my education, I don't think it should be disregarded. I think it should be re re like re-input, I guess. I don't know what the better word is, but yeah, it should be not only like, yeah, we should be teaching English, but we should also be teaching Spanish to the kids who do speak Spanish, and mainly, and like, not mainly, but like they have a hard time speaking English, because I don't think that they should be going to school and then just kind of like forgetting about their roots. They should also take that into consideration, because that is their culture, and it's something that they should be proud of, and something that they should proudly like embrace. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I really agree, because I wrote in mine that like, although I'm not bilingual, my best friend since I was like a little girl is, and I know that like when she was young, she was like embarrassed and felt like she had to really like assimilate, which was like understandable. But now that I know that we're older, like I've gone to like their family holidays, and all of her family are all immigrants from Puerto Rico, and most of them the older generation don't speak any English, and you can see like she says like how nice it is to feel like comfortable for once like speaking without like feeling like embarrassed, or that like certain words, like sometimes she has a hard time like remembering the English version, and like there it doesn't matter. And I think that's like important for someone to be comfortable with their heritage.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really think that you know, the kids in the schools also have a large role, because, you know, kids like to pick on each other, and they like to point out the differences in people. And that's something that I really had in my experience. So that's also a contributing factor to why I pushed away my language of origin. So
That gets very close to bullying. It's not necessarily that, but it gets very close to that. I was interested if you could say something briefly about the experience of being in a bilingual class, I guess, or no, school.
yeah,
And
preschool.
yeah, yeah. And if you have any memories about that in particular that you could share, that would be really interesting.
Yeah, so this preschool has, it's mainly for like migrants and seasonal migrants. Well, it was mainly that before. It's still running, and it's has that factor to it, but it's now more of like a community daycare. But before, um, they had a lot more Spanish, like teachers that spoke Spanish, and they also have teachers in the classroom that also speak English. And one of the like few memories I had a bunch of friends who lived on a farm, because I lived on an apple farm, which is also a really big factor in like seasonal migrants in my upbringing. Um, so I had a lot of friends that also lived on the farm with me, and we would all go to school. And one of like our favorite memories was going on the field trips, either to like the libraries or like pumpkin picking, going to the farms. And at the farms, we were all, the majority of the kids in my class, we all spoke Spanish. So they would bring out people who worked there, and they would talk to us in Spanish so we could all better understand. So it's also really cool. But sometimes they would bring in like people to help us with like cooking crafts, I guess you could say, like just cutting up like pastries or like fruit and like little melon balls and stuff like that. And they would also talk to us in Spanish. So the Spanish influence of the language is really, really important to them, because they would teach English to us, but if there were any like English speaking students, they would also teach them Spanish.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
That's interesting. That's really
Mhm.
interesting. Where was this school located? Where was it at?
I live in Ulster County, which is like,
Sorry.
I don't know if anyone knows like SUNY New Paltz.
Yeah.
I know exactly what you're talking about because I'm from Orange County.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So it's a daycare in New Paltz, and it's specifically for migrants and seasonal migrants, just because in that area, there is a lot of apple farms and there's a lot of seasonal migrants that come. We now see a lot more coming from like Jamaica, but beforehand, you would see a lot of like Latin American migrants and stuff like that.
Wow.
So it was like a well-populated area.
Yeah, your memory, Jaylene, was so beautiful. You should write something, like a little essay precisely on those memories. I think it's something worth to keep and share with people, in my view.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Next person then will be Kaylee.
Hold on. Okay. I do have to read off my computer, so I don't know if that's going to change anything, but we'll see. Mine kind of relates to Jaylene's because I grew up in an area where there's a bunch of farms around me. I personally didn't grow up on a farm, but I actually went to school with a lot of students who did. And as I grew up, I had to go into special education classes because I'm dyslexic. So I got to meet a lot of these students who did come from farms. So that kind of just sets my essay. I'm just gonna read my intro on it, but can you still see me?
Totally, yes, very clearly.
I can't see you, but I'll read it. I grew up in a town called Ward, New York, and this town is known to be pretty wealthy. It is pretty expensive to live here, mostly because the taxes are so high. My school was mostly made up of white kids. It wasn't all white kids, but the majority of my school was. My parents weren't rich, but I went to a school mostly with a decent amount of rich kids. In my town, you could take the train into the city, and it would only take you an hour. A lot of my classmates' parents commuted to the city for high-paying jobs, but the other half of my classmates came from a town called Pine Island. In this town, it was mostly made up of farmers and lower-class families. Most of the students whose parents came here to work on the farms in Pine Island didn't speak much English. And that's just the intro. That's my intro of it.
Yeah, I hope our questions allow you to say more about your essay, because that's a brief beginning.
I can read more if you want.
Well, I'm giving you a chance by saying, as you answer the questions, you can bring your more ideas or what you wrote into the conversation. So my question has to do with this difference between kids coming from, say, wealthy families and kids who were not. Because in the beginning of the book, I guess it's the first chapter, when Rodriguez is talking about the going to elementary school, he says, he doesn't say the majority, he says all my classmates were from upper middle class families. And I felt the difference somehow. He's always said, I was born in a family, my parents, Mexican family, my parents had, were working class people looking for jobs. And so he felt not only different because he spoke Spanish, but because of the social class situation.
Yeah.
So how that impacts your life, seeing that difference, and how was that like in your own experience?
I actually did use what you just talked about, the one quote. It was on page 9 if you had the book. Do you want me to read the quote?
Go ahead, you're free to do.
An ascent of geography sent me to school where all my classmates were white, many of the children of doctors and lawyers and business executives. All my classmates certainly must have uneasy on the first day of school, as most children are uneasy to find themselves apart from their families in the first institution of their lives. But I was astonished.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there was a lot, I would say a lot of rich kids that I knew, but there was also a lot of kids who from the farms. And I kind of got a mix of both kind of lives. And the ones who are, I would say, had more money, like they definitely, you could tell by like what they wore, and a lot of them were like in honors classes, like they were very high up in like their education, you know. I'm like, I would say middle class, so I kind of am in the middle, but yeah, I don't know. It was kind of cool to meet a lot of the kids who came from the farms just to see their background. Some of them did only come for like half a school year for like the seasons of farming, but some of them did stay like the whole entire just to get like a high school diploma. So yeah.
Okay, thanks. Second question by someone. If there is no other question, I'll ask you a simple question, which is
Okay.
this one. Given that, well, it looks like you kind of answer it, but did you see one of these kids coming from the farms succeed? Like, because I'm thinking of Richard Rodriguez again, and how successful he was throughout his education, but also he needed extra support, as you remember, attention for hours and hours. So did you sense that you get to be close to someone who really was, very smart, coming from the farms, and that succeeded clearly more than maybe the other kids who were coming also from the farms?
I mean, there were some kids who there's like community college close by. A lot of them went there for 2 years. I don't know if they're still there. I think they are. Some of them I know are still there, but and then some of the other ones like just went back to help their families out and just work. Yeah.
Very important.
Mhm.
Because what you're saying also pertains to the book. See, Richard Rodriguez never had to do that. And that, I think, allowed him to have time for leisure. Because, he says, well, I was reading in my room, but that means he's not working to support the family in any way. And he's got hours, plenty of hours, to concentrate and do what he really likes, which is go into a different universe through the book or through the books, and keep being himself in that regard, and exploring worlds, because that's, for example, fiction will help you do that. If you read, a novel, you get into a different universe, but also language, right? Characters, situations, and so on and so forth. So in that regard, Rodriguez was unique, because many kids, well, the kids coming from the farms that you're saying, they will have to help out as well, the families. And that's time consuming, right? Time consuming. So thanks a lot, Kaylee. Thanks a lot. Okay. And the last person is Megan today.
Okay. So let me get mine all situated. Okay. Can you see me okay? I can't see you. Mine popped away.
We can see your picture.
Oh, let me see. Is that better?
Now I can see you, yeah.
Okay. So
Are you reading paper? Are you going to be reading from?
I'm sorry, what was that?
No, don't worry. Just go ahead.
Okay. So I'm just getting to where I wanted to talk. So mine, I kind of relates to Kaylee's. So where I talk about, I am not bilingual, and I didn't really relate to him in those ways, but I did relate to the parts where he talked about like low class families and how they were like a minority in themselves. So I did relate mine to that. So this is where I'll be reading. Mine's kind of in the middle, so it kind of jumps in at a weird spot, but I just wanted to introduce it that way.
That's okay. Nice. Yes.
So, although I cannot relate to being bilingual, I was raised on a farm and I went to school at a school district that was close to a military base, where 96% were military students. So when I spoke of having cows and horses as a little girl, they all thought it was dirty and smelly and gross, and I became very embarrassed about my home. It was once something I loved and thought was such a cool part of myself, but I no longer told the kids I went to school with or became friends with about my pets at home. Even when I brought home my long-term boyfriend, I did not lead on to my different little pets I had at home. That being said, when I was home and able to talk to my parents and my grandparents about the sheep and what I did at that bar in the day, they were all interested in it. And I could talk to them and they knew what I meant, and it was created a special bond that made me cherish them more. It was something special that I had between us, the same way I see speaking your native language with your family can make you grow closer. So that's how I related to it, because previously to this, I had talked about where I was actually speaking about how his languages, and he was saying how when he was younger, it was like a comfort to him when he went home and could talk to his family in Spanish, and it was something he wasn't able to do in school. And I wrote that I think speaking in your native language and to your family, I don't think it's something to isolate you from the rest of the English speaking world or similarly. I think it's okay to have something that makes you feel special with your family and something to hold on to. And for me, it was kind of like that, where I felt like I couldn't really talk about like the things I enjoyed at home at school, but when I got to go home to talk to my family, it made it like a special bond and I felt safe.
So what did you do to kind of fit in? What did you do in addition to not say, not to mention your pets, as you were saying, or your life back home? How were you able to make yourself, like a niche, a space, room among your classmates that were
I
coming
guess
from
I
mostly army families in the army, something?
Yeah, so like in my community, it started as like a big farm community, but we got a big military base. And so then became like none of it really, like it was all taken over by new people that moved in, and we didn't really have any of like the local farmers anymore. And so then I guess obviously like they're kids, like it's not their fault to just like not understanding. Kids can just be mean. So I guess I just like stopped talking about the things and started like just in talking about like what they enjoyed and liking what they liked, even though it wasn't really relevant to my life.
I see. I see. I did see the connection between his difficulties kind of conveying his own life or sharing his own life with his classmates. There was, a disconnect, actually, like a huge gap between the experiences they were going through and his own experience. In addition, he was by himself, more or less, and his siblings in the school. And I don't know if that was that your case? Did you feel like, oh, it's only me here, coming from the
Yeah,
school?
just because like there wasn't really anyone else in any of my classes that was like that was cool or understood what it was like to have like live on a farm, because I guess kids when they were young, like they just didn't like, they thought it was like a gross thing because it was like, cows are smelly. And so I was like, I don't know why people think it's like so weird. And I remember like being on the bus and people would like drive by farms and they'd be like, ew, and I'd be like, I don't get it. And so it was just like a separation of like not understanding.
Did you stay in the same school until high school?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. Anybody else? Any other question?
I have a question. I know that Richard Rodriguez also mentions like his identity throughout the book. Do you think that like your experience with like the other kids kind of changed the way you viewed yourself in a way?
Nice question. Good question. Mhm.
I think like as a little kid it did because I like felt like ashamed of like what the things I liked and like it wasn't something like you wanted to like share. But I think also when you grow up you kind of have to just be like it's like who I am and like where I grew up. It doesn't like make me who I guess the person I am or whatever. But I think it's just something you have to like accept and be like proud of your family. And I think that's kind of also like what Richard Rodriguez had to do to be like just proud of his family, like even though they were different.
Yes, he says that. And he says also, if you remember, that I think it was both his mother and father, they would say, you are Mexican and be proud of him, being Mexican. And if somebody, he says, if somebody would ask me, I would say, I am Mexican, okay? And he wasn't making a big deal about that. He says, I just would say them, I am Mexican, that's my heritage, okay? Something like that. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Well done. Okay, well done. And notice this is what I was trying to do with this presentation, like have a conversation on what you wrote, basically, and get to know you better, and kind of end the semester in this fashion. This is very similar, or more or less the same, as what I'm expecting us to do if you write a paper on Martin Espada's poetry, because that's one of the options for the final exam, right? So you would come, to the final exam, you would read a segment, a meaningful segment of your paper on his poetry, and we would ask you one question, okay? So I think it's a nice way of ending the semester and sharing among us what we were writing. So I would like to continue today with precisely the final exam, because that way I'll be able to describe in more detail what is it that I'm expecting from you, okay, at the end of the class. And I have that somewhere in here, the syllabus. Oh, the syllabus. So I'm going to share my screen with you. And so notice for the final exam, I'm giving you two options. Option number one is to write a paper. Option number two is to do a presentation, a spoken word presentation. If you write the paper, choose poems from one of the categories we go over in class. So we need to talk about categories. We can do this Monday, okay? By that I mean, for example, family. That could be one category, family, poems about family. Second category could be women. How does he present women throughout his poetry? That could be a category that you could choose from. And you have the category, and then you find 5 poems that pertain to that category. One suggestion I have for you is that you could email me and tell me, okay, I'd like to write my paper about this topic, and these are my 5 poems. What do you think? And I can give you feedback, okay? I'm also saying here that the 5 poems must be selected from those we discussed in class. But if you have additional poems, that will be all right, as long as you share that with me and I say, yes, that's a useful poem, you can use it, and it's not complicated. If I know that the poem will complicate you too much, I will say discard it, okay? And I'll try my best to give you another option. So include at least 5 short quotations, no more than 5 lines of poetry from the poems you selected, and write out a 5-page paper. Type it up, double space it, and you have the description right there, added by bibliography. And by bibliography here, I mean just the book, okay? Just the one book, Alabanza, Martin Espada, Alabanza, and that is your bibliography, unless you would like to also reference one of the videos or maybe something that you read, but you are not obligated, okay? As long as you have the book reference that we are reading, the Alabanza book, you're fine. And then turn your papers into Moodle right after the final exam, Zoom session on Wednesday, December 16. Notice it's early in the morning, 8 to 10 a.m. And we have the paper report as you were doing today, right? Reading of a key page of the paper, explain. Now I'm going to ask you to explain why you read your segment and what is the significance, the relevance of what you read to us. Okay, so that's kind of an implicit question, right? So you read your segment and then you say, this is why I read it, and this is how it fits within my whole paper. And then we will ask you a question. It doesn't have to be me, the question, you know, it could be by one of your classmates, as you can see. Here you have the evaluation criteria for the paper. You can take a look at it. And then option number 2. But before I go over option number 2, do you have any questions pertaining to the paper? Notice that we have 2 more sessions to go over poems, okay? If you have a preference for a poem, maybe we can go over that as well, okay? So one suggestion may be try to see if you can try to see if you can make a collection of 5 poems, a little collection according to a theme as you are reading. That will help you already in terms of preparing for the paper. So option number 2. As we discussed the poems by Espada in class, select one of at least 20 lines in length to do a spoken word performance in front of the class. Well, in this case, I wrote this, you know, for my face-to-face class situation, as you can see. And you can also, if you like to choose a different poem that is longer, that's all right. Just select 20 lines to be performed. And of course, you need to let me know, right? This is my poem and these are my lines, way ahead of time. So next week would be the time for you to do that. So you need to know your lines by heart. You need to be expressive. You need to give color to your lines, to your poem, right? It must come alive. And this would be like a monologue, I'm saying. And this is to be done at the final exam. So we will have some of you, and this is my conception of the final exam, some of you presenting on your paper, and maybe a couple of you doing a spoken word performance presentation. In addition to the performance here, it says you will also need to write a 1-page, I give you the words in this case, double-spaced essay stating the reasons why you selected your poem. By that, this is what I mean. Tell us what is the relevance of the poem. Explain the poem to me, okay? Basically, okay, you chose the poem for some reasons, explains the reasons. What made this poem relevant to you as a reader, right? As a reader. So basically a little essay on your poem is what I'm expecting. So here we have 2 things, right? The performance and the little essay. Submit your essay to Moodle right after the final exam session. And I say, please dress up for your performance. Again, this was for the face-to-face class situation. But what I would say is that you cannot have a hat on, baseball cap, right? That you'll make sure that lighting is appropriate for your presentation, that we will see you clearly, right? That of course, your camera will be on, and that we will be able to look at you as you are doing your poem. And maybe I don't know, think about, just make it the presentation crystal clear visually, okay? That's what I would say, please, this compares to dressing up for the performance, you know, being dressing up semi-formally. So create a situation, a visual situation that is rather formal, semi-formal, okay, for the performance. That's what I'm saying today. You have the criteria for my evaluation right there, so that I would, if I were you, to take a look, please, to the evaluation criteria in both cases, because that will help you, you know, for your work and get it to the level of quality that we need for the class. Any questions? Okay, no questions about this. So, oh, there is one, did somebody write in the chat? It was, okay. I wanted to finish the class by going back to Martínez Parra. And this week, Martínez Parra wrote a poem after visiting the tomb of Frederick Douglass. And I have the poem right here, but I wanted to ask you, who was Frederick Douglass?
He was a Black man who ran against Abraham Lincoln for presidency at one time, and he was also a part of the slave abolishment, I believe.
Yes, yes. He was one of the greatest abolitionists in the United States. And he was, prior to that, a slave. And that's what Martínez Parra describes right here in his poem.
He was also taught how to read and write by his master's wife taught him how to read and write. So he was a very educated slave, because most slaves wouldn't be taught how to read or write at that time.
Well, it says in here, according to Parra, when he's at the tomb, notice of a man born as chattel who taught himself to read in secret.
Oh.
Scraping the letters in his name with chalk and wood. And then he became highly educated, as Lindsay is saying, highly educated. He wrote his own autobiography. He went to Europe, and he was, an activist, we could say, for the case of abolition. So in this case, Martínez Parra, in this poem that he wrote, is making a connection between the election of President Obama and the former slave Frederick Douglass. And he's trying to connect both figures somehow, because at the time when President Obama was elected, I guess the whole country felt that this was a change, significant change, historic change, right, of proportions, given that this was to be the first African-American president of the country. So, but notice that in here, Parra is making connection back, right? Like here is the present, the future, but also Frederick Douglass, remembering Frederick Douglass, and maybe even placing Frederick Douglass in the future of the country, okay? The past is not in the past is also ahead of us, okay? It's pushing us forward to be decent to one another and to be anti-racist. That's the way I simply read the poem in this occasion. But I wanted you to get kind of acquainted with this poem that you can find in Martínez Parra's webpage very easily, because of the video, okay? The video that I posted for this week. Where did my class go? Here, this video. And I'm going to ask you to listen to what he says about.
It wasn't like that. It was the polar opposite of that sensation. There was an unearthly quiet. And I could hear nothing but those leaves falling from the trees with the gentlest breeze. And I had this strange sensation. Why don't we see 10,000 people here? Why aren't we all here gathered at the tomb of Frederick Douglass to say yes and to say thank you? And it was me and the person who brought me there at the longitude and latitude, right? In standing before the grave of this slave who changed history and made the history of the present day possible. Without Douglass, there is no Obama.
Without Lincoln, there is no Obama. So it's not only a matter, is it, of faith in history, it's a matter of faith in people who have the imagination and the audacity to make history.
Absolutely. And certainly Frederick Douglass understood his role in terms of acting as an advocate during Lincoln's administration. He was obviously putting some pressure on the White House. At the same time, he was issuing a call to arms to his own community to rise up, because he understood that history ultimately comes from below. It is a part of, he's enveloping Lincoln in a movement. There's a movement that surrounds Lincoln and the other abolitionists to move all of this forward and make it a reality.
There were not 10,000 people with you there at the tomb, but the poem suggests someone else had been there and left this newspaper.
There were other people who had come before me and had left various objects. I don't know who they were. Someone had left a newspaper, perhaps aware, perhaps not, that Douglass himself had been a journalist, that Douglass himself had been an editor, that Douglass himself would have appreciated a newspaper left at his tomb. Someone else had left a labor union t-shirt. And I found that particularly extraordinary.
What did it say?
Well, it was from the Service Workers Union. And there was that sticker on the sleeve that said, "I voted today." Remember those were being passed out?
The SEIU.
Yes,
yes,
exactly.
Right. Yes.
And that's when I began to envision, who has left this behind? Someone who was a member of this union. Who were they communicating with? Was it Douglass? They were attempting to say to him, look what happened a few days ago. I don't know.
You're not going mystical on this, are you?
Maybe. I hope not. Yes, definitely.
What do you take that question to mean?
I take that question to mean that there are times when poets have to go to places that cannot be explained away as a matter of evidence and logic. That we have to be able to reach out and put our hands on the intangible, to touch it, to feel it, to see it.
Martine, where do you think this language of the impossible, the unimaginable, comes from?
For me, it comes from poetry. And it comes from the tradition, the poetic tradition to which I belong. It comes from Walt Whitman. It comes from Pablo Neruda. And it comes from some of my contemporaries as well.
And what is it? What is happening in that poetry?
What is happening in that poetry is we are breaking through the boundaries of what we accept as a given every single day. We see something else as possible. It is an act of the imagination, and too rarely people see the connection between the imagination and the political. Right? There is such a thing as the political imagination.
Yes.
And oftentimes those of us who speak in the language of the impossible or the unthinkable, the unimaginable, are called idealists or dreamers or mad. Hello, William Blake. But we're also pragmatists. We also understand the real world. We also understand the need for visions of a better world, because the alternative is despair. And despair is dangerous.
Anybody who talks the way you
So my question to you would be, why is, according to Spada, why is imagination so important for poets and for himself as a poet? What would be your answer to the question? Why is imagination so important for poets and poetry?
Imagination is important so you can look at things and describe them better. Well, describe them in a way no one really has. That sounds very like that catches the reader's attention, you know?
Yes, I do. So it's kind of a fresh view of something. And in that regard, it's kind of unexpected.
Isn't imagination a part of imagery, which is an element of poetry?
I think so, and that would connect us to the visual nature of some of the poems Martin Spada wrote. So yes, and he says, I think he said in the interview, envisioning or envision, and that brings us to precisely your comment, Lindsay. Anything else? No matter what, you know, he said a crucial phrase, I think, for his poetry, political imagination. I think he aims to produce that kind of poetry at times, or embrace, you know, that perspective to write his poetry. Poetry of the political imagination. It doesn't have to be, you know, partisan, okay, belonging to a specific political party, but political imagination in terms of maybe embracing democracy, embracing a forward-thinking perspective, I would put it that way. And that should be the end for the class session today. Thanks a lot to all of you, and please have a great weekend. I'll see you Tuesday with more poetry by Spada. Have a great day.
Have a good day, Professor, and a good weekend.
Thanks. You too, Kels.
Thank you.
Thank you.